Good evening, friends. I'm Emma, the host of the True Crime Witch podcast. Join me every other week as we delve into everything murderous, mysterious, and downright macabre. You can find the podcast by searching the True Crime Witch podcast on all of your favourite podcast apps, and search for us on social media just using the True Crime Witch. Hope to see you there. Remember, friends, stay safe and stay spooky.
Today's sponsor is Hero Cosmetics. They sent us over the Mighty Patch, which is a hydrocolloid acne patch. I actually had a monster pimple pop up last night, so I stuck on a Mighty Patch Original overnight, and this morning the pimple was totally flat. I have tried loads of different skincare products to try and get rid of a spot, that popped up the night before an important event, and nothing has worked like the Mighty Patch. You can literally see the gunk on the patch, so you know it's worked. It's very cool and it's suitable for even the most sensitive skin because it only uses one simple ingredient. If you want to try the Mighty Patch for yourself, use code CRIMELAPSE15 for 15% off on herocosmetics.com.
Police were called and discovered the bodies when all three failed to turn up for work.
He managed to conceal himself within the bed for 2 days while police officers were working around him.
And one of the victims' bodies was on the bed, making it difficult for police to search the room without disturbing the evidence.
Welcome to Crime Lapse. I am Eileen.
And I'm Charlie. Jordan Berner once said, quote, "We stop looking for monsters under the bed when we realise they are inside of us." Unquote. This is Monster Under the Bed. The murders of Alice Adams and Tibor Vass.
On August 10th, 2011, the police were called to an apartment in New Road, Harlington, near Heathrow Airport in London. Inside the flat, they were met with a gruesome scene. 2 people were found brutally murdered. The hunt for their killer began, but they did not need to look for her. The victims were both 20 years old. Their names were Alice Adams and Tibor Vass. The two worked together as receptionists at the Radisson Edwardian Hotel near the airport. The flat was occupied by Tibor and another receptionist, Attila. Attila was nowhere to be found. Police began searching for him. They knew he was alive because he had made a Facebook post saying, quote, "I'd like to wake up from this nightmare," unquote.
Police were called and discovered the bodies when all three failed to turn up for work.
Alice Adams had started working at the hotel 3 weeks earlier. She had made friends quite quickly because she was bubbly, friendly, and outgoing. She had especially bonded with Tibor Vass. Tibor had begun working at the hotel a year earlier after moving over from Hungary. Alice was from Iverheath in Berks. She was a talented musician, and this is something Alice and Tibor had in common. On the night they were killed, there had been a party in the flat, celebrating Tibor getting a university place back in Hungary. When Tibor, Alice and Attila all failed to show up to work the next day, their colleague alerted the police. When the police gained entry to the flat, they found Alice lying on the living room floor, her face covered with a pillow. She had been stabbed multiple times in the front and back of her body. In one of the bedrooms, Tibor was found naked on the bed. He had been stabbed twice, but there was very little blood on his body. Police combed the scene for clues and for any trace of Attila, who was still missing.
There was no trace of Ban and a search was started.
The scene was extremely violent. Police feared that Attila had been abducted or even killed somewhere else. The flat was cordoned off and a forensic investigation was carried out. Alice had been stabbed 22 times. She was fully clothed on the living room floor and a pillow was covering her face. Tibor had been stabbed in the heart twice. It seemed as though the killer then cut off Tibor's clothes, cleaned him and posed him on the bed, lying on his back with his knees bent, fully naked. Numerous knives were found in the apartment. There were also some drugs found, presumably left over from the party the night before. Poppers, a type of drug usually used for its euphoric and sexual enhancing effects. Male DNA was found on both Tibor and Alice's bodies, indicating that they had had sexual contact with each other and another man. For 2 days, detectives and crime scene technicians were in the flat collecting evidence. The next day, when they went back to the scene, one of the investigation team noticed a bedroom door that had been open was now closed. Police had to force their way in as a bed had been pushed to block the door. On the bed lay Attila Ban, naked, bloody and drunk. Attila had a knife sticking out of his arm and buttock. When police asked him what happened, he could not speak. He began communicating in sign language. Investigators had no idea where Attila had come from. They had searched the entire flat, including the loft. They never thought to check under the bed.
And one of the victims' bodies was on the bed, making it difficult for police to search the room without disturbing the evidence.
Attila, Alice and Tibor all worked together at the Radisson Edwardian Hotel in West London, near Heathrow Airport. Attila was originally from Hungary, had left as a young man. He worked a lot. He was very experienced in the hotel industry, having worked in hotels in the US and UK. He had won Employee of the Year numerous times, including 2011. Attila was openly gay, something that was not easy to be in Hungary when he had left his home country years before. He was well liked and had received promotions and perks in his position as manager at the Radisson Edwardian Hotel. When Tibor started working there, Attila took him under his wing. They were from the same country, and Tibor's mother was happy he had someone to take care of him while he was away from home. When Attila was given a staff apartment, he asked Tibor if he'd like to live with him. Attila would go as far as changing Tibor's shifts so that they were working together all of the time. Tibor appreciated having someone from home to look up to, and did not realise that Attila was trying to groom him. They got on well, but it was more than friendship in Attila's eyes. Tibor was straight. He didn't have any romantic or sexual feelings for Attila, but this did not deter the older Hungarian from jealous outbursts. Attila would launch angry rants and temper tantrums when he felt like Tibor was leaving him out or having a social life without him. When Alice Adams joined the team in summer of 2011, Tibor struck up a fast friendship with the new girl, much to his admirers' dismay. Tibor had been offered a university place back in Hungary and was due to move back home. Attila could not let him go.
On the night Alice and Tibor were murdered, they had been at an after-work party in Tibor and Attila's shared staff apartment. Other employees had attended, and there was plenty of alcohol and other substances consumed. Apparently, when the party died down and there was only Attila, Alice and Tibor left, things got heated. The co-workers engaged in a threesome. At some point, Attila snapped. He stabbed Alice 22 times in the front and back, penetrating her heart, left lung, stomach, spleen and diaphragm. She was left on the floor with a pillow over her face. Maybe Attila couldn't bear to humanise the young woman whose life he had just taken. Tibor was stabbed twice in the heart. Attila then cut off his clothes and had a bath with Tibor's lifeless body. Attila claimed that he had tried to commit suicide by cutting his wrists in the bath and did not want to die alone. When that attempt failed, he positioned Tibor on the bed. Attila tried to kill himself again, this time by putting a hairdryer into the bath with him in an attempt to electrocute himself, but it continued to work under the water. After this, Attila cut into the side of a divan bed base, the bed Tibor's body lay upon. He gathered some supplies, including some water and his phone, and got inside the bed base, concealing his entryway with a sheet. From inside the bed, he updated his Facebook status. He posted, quote, "I would like to wake up from this nightmare," unquote. He cut little holes so he could see around the room from his hideout under the bed. He remained in there for 2 days as investigators and crime scene techs scoured the room for clues. When detectives failed to locate Attila, they tried to trace his phone. It was pinging off towers near the hotel, but they couldn't have imagined that he was hiding inside the bed. On the second night of investigation, he tried to kill himself again by cutting his throat and stabbing himself with craft knives. He was found the next morning after he had barricaded himself into another bedroom. But suddenly, the charismatic, chatty receptionist was struck dumb. He claimed he could not speak or remember what had happened.
They were killed not by a stranger, but by Attila Ban, a man who was a trusted friend and fellow receptionist at the hotel.
Hey listeners, if you're tuning into this show, 1, you have good taste, and 2, you might enjoy another show that we host called Death by Champagne, the podcast here to keep you up at night. I'm Mackenzie.
And I'm Olivia.
We have topics in all realms. From the reality of true crime to the depths of the occult, we have dozens of episodes to binge that range from hair-raising scares to infuriating miscarriages of justice.
We've covered everything from the origins of Satan to the crimes of an unidentified serial killer in our hometown of St. Louis. Other episodes include tales of unsolved mysteries, murder investigations, disappearances, cold cases, hauntings, folklore, and people in history that are stranger than fiction.
In Season 3, you can join us for a true crime book club, giving in-depth coverage on cases living in the darkest corners of our bookshelves. Our first multi-part series is on the crimes of Gary Ridgway, focusing on his family, victims, and survivors.
So grab your cat keychain, surround yourself in a salt circle, lock your doors, and unlock that phone.
Hail Satan!
And pop some bottles.
Attila was taken to hospital for treatment and arrested shortly after. It was at this stage that the investigators found his hideout. He had spent hours watching the investigation, even defecating in the cramped space, avoiding detection. He was lying under the mattress he had posed Tibor on. The trial began on July 9, 2012. The prosecutors presented evidence to support the premise that Ban was obsessed with Tibor Vass and jealous of his relationship with anybody else, mainly his female colleagues. Ban pursued Mr. Vass relentlessly, but Vass wasn't interested. Attila was openly homosexual and Tibor was quite the opposite. Instead of reciprocating Ban's infatuation, Tibor had numerous sexual encounters with other women who worked at the Radisson Edwardian Heathrow Hotel. The court then heard that everything began when Alice, Tibor and Attila decided to have drinks after work on the night of August 9th. A number of people had been at the flat that night, and Ban, amongst others, had decided to take poppers. According to verywellmind.com, quote, "Poppers are widely used as recreational drugs, especially on the gay scene. They are typically taken as fumes inhaled directly from small bottles. Poppers work very quickly, producing an almost instant high or rush of warm sensations and feelings of dizziness, similar to sensations of extreme alcohol intoxication. The effects come on very quickly after inhaling the drug, but unlike drugs such as alcohol, they only last for seconds or minutes. While some people find the effects of poppers pleasurable, others find it extremely disorientating and unpleasant." Ban then told the court that when everyone else had left and he was alone with Alice and Tibor, the three of them had laid on the bed and Tibor and Ban had taken turns to perform sexual acts on Alice Adams. This was also supported by DNA evidence that was found from both men on Miss Adams' breasts. Although Ban admitted that he could remember the threesome, he continued to persist that he had no recollection of killing either of them that night, insisting that he only realised what he had done when he woke up the next morning and found the pair dead. He states, quote, "I accept I killed them, I just can't remember what happened," unquote. Attila told the court that he had tried to kill himself by cutting his own wrists. Explaining why he had got into the bath with Mr. Vass's body, he states, quote, "I did not want to die alone," unquote.
During the trial, the jury heard that on the day of the murders, all three of the victims had been drinking together at a staff flat behind the hotel. When Ban turned on the victims, he stabbed Alice Adams 22 times and Tibor Vass twice. He then tried to kill himself, and when that failed, he hid in the hollowed-out base of a double divan bed, managing to conceal himself there for 2 days while the investigation team, the police and pathology team carried out their inquiries around him. While he was hidden there, he even managed to update his Facebook page.
After he was found, investigators moved the divan bed and realised where Attila had been hiding the whole time. Prosecutor Richard Whittam QC addressed the court. Quote, Attila Ban was found naked on the single bed. He had wounds to his wrist, forearm and neck. It became apparent that he had been hiding in the divan base. He must have been there throughout the attendance of the pathologist, the removal of the bodies, and the examination of the scene by crime scene examiners. He had the presence of mind to have concealed himself effectively and to remain undetected throughout the time they were on the premises. Unquote.
Michael Burnham, QC, acting in defence of Attila, returned this by saying, quote, I would not suggest it's a matter to hold against him. He himself felt like he wanted to die, and if they, the police, came in, they would save him. On the second night, he certainly wasn't trying to conceal the fact that he was there, because he came out and changed a large number of things to make clear his presence. Michael Burnham, QC, also suggested that, by bathing Mr. Vass and posing him on the bed, Attila's actions were, quote, perhaps some kind of homage to Tibor. Finally, Mr. Burnham states, quote, this remains a baffling case. The two people he killed were his friends. He killed them both for reasons which remain obscure. He genuinely can't remember what triggered the killings. Unquote. On the 18th of July 2012, after just 5 hours of deliberation, the jury found Attila Ban guilty of the murder of Alice Adams and Tibor Vass. On the 18th of July 2012, after just 5 hours of deliberation, the jury found Attila Ban guilty of the murder of Alice Adams and Tibor Vass. On the 17th of August, Attila was sentenced to a minimum of 26 years in prison. The sentencing judge said, quote, you say you cannot and still cannot remember. There is of course now no one else to assist. That in itself creates an even greater burden for the two grieving families, arising from the uncertainty of their loved ones' last moments. Unquote. Attila was dressed in the same outfit he wore throughout the trial. He showed no remorse for his actions as he was taken away to his cell. He merely nodded as his sentence was passed to him. Detective Inspector John Finch spoke with reporters following the trial. He said, quote, Attila Ban's profound obsession for Tibor Vass drove him to commit a disturbing and frenzied attack. Ban manipulated Mr. Vass into believing that their friendship was genuine. However, he exploited this closeness to kill him and his friend Miss Adams, who was simply caught up in events. The court has been presented with an overwhelming amount of evidence ensuring Ban's conviction today for his utterly evil actions. I would like to pay tribute to the friends and family of Mr. Vass and Miss Adams, who have shown immense dignity, strength and courage throughout this investigation, and have been subjected to hearing the most dreadful things about how their loved one died. Someone hiding under a bed for 2 days with a dead man who he killed is hard to believe. It was an astonishing and horrific scene. Unquote. When questioned on why investigators had not noticed Attila hiding under the bed sooner, John Finch said that the police had done exactly what would have been expected of them in that scenario, and therefore had not been negligent.
Attila Ban's a very clever, very calculating, cold man, and he managed to conceal himself within the bed for 2 days while police officers were working around him. He took provisions in there. He remained silent in there throughout the whole 2 days.
He went on to say that the crime scene examiners could possibly lose crucial forensic evidence if they lifted up beds looking for suspects at every scene they attended, adding, quote, I would not want anyone to do anything different in future. I have looked back at this several times with senior management. It was such a strange and bizarre thing for a person to do. It's beggars belief. Unquote.
In a statement released after Attila Ban's conviction, Alice Adams' mother, Sarah, paid tribute to her daughter. Quote, my heart is broken. My life will always be tinged with sadness. I miss Alice so much. I would do anything for one more Alice squeezy hug, one more smile. Every single person I love and care about, is carrying the burden of incredible grief. My daughter Caroline is 19, just a year younger than Alice. They shared all their important experiences in life and planned a future where they would always be there for each other. 3 months after Alice's murder, Caroline was fired from her job and promising career as she lost her confidence and felt she couldn't cope. Alice's murder has changed her view of human nature, and she says she doesn't want to live in a world where things like this can happen. She has nightmares every night, panic attacks, and is scared of people she doesn't know. She has a constant nagging fear that someone else she loves is going to die. She has lost her best friend. My daughter Daisy was very close to Alice. They shared the same birthday and were supposed to be celebrating together last Tuesday, 10th of July. Daisy was 9 and Alice should have been 21. Telling her that someone had stabbed her sister to death is the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life. How can you explain that to an 8-year-old? She sleeps in Alice's room, which gives her some comfort, and I recently noticed she's written a message on the wall behind Alice's bed. It simply says, "Alice, I love you. I am disappointed." This modest and unpretentious understatement touched my heart. Last August, my sister Catherine was due to get married in Hawaii. All the family, including Alice, 14 of us, had booked flights and accommodation and were looking forward to celebrating a wonderfully happy event. A week before we were due to fly out, Alice was violently murdered. Alice loved and cared for everyone she ever met, friends and strangers alike. It breaks my heart to know that the last thing she knew was hatred and violence. Alice's death has created extreme emotions. Grief, anger, and overwhelming sorrow within my family, and have changed our family forever. As a mum, you are supposed to protect your children, and every day and every night I have to deal with the knowledge that I failed. The most difficult thing to cope with is not knowing exactly what happened to my lovely Alice that night. Horrific as it would have been to hear, the truth would be preferable to the constant struggle going on in my mind of trying to figure out the sequence of events leading up to Alice's murder. There are no words to adequately express what an amazing and unique person Alice was, and how much love, joy, passion and compassion she brought into so many people's lives. Her loss is a tragedy beyond expression.
She touched so many people's lives. She was, nearly 500 people came to her funeral, and even since then we've heard stories about her and things that she did. And you always hear this about people that are gone, but she really, really was an extra especially kind person.
Tibor Vass's mother, Rosalia, also released a statement about her son. It read, "As a young boy, Tibor was interested in music and arts, repairing gadgets and practicing freestyle tricks on his BMX bicycle, Daisy. At home, he was always innovative and enjoyed experimenting with computers, building stereo speakers from cardboards and old cables. He had a passion for photography and spent his first salary on a professional camera. Tibor was always friendly, helpful, supportive, approachable, outgoing and trustworthy. He had many friends in both Hungary and the UK. He loved to be surrounded by people. He was very family orientated and adored his family endlessly. He was very artistic. He liked drawing and playing music. He could play almost all musical instruments. His favourite instrument was a 100-year-old piano. On the same piano he taught his sister Isabella how to play, and they used to sing and play together, whilst their father and I listened to them. After the sudden loss of their father in 2007, the three of us found it hard to move on. We grew closer and did everything together. Tibor came with me to work, and he spent most of his free time with his sister. He taught her how to spell her name, play the piano and skate. He was her brother and father at the same time. Tibor wanted to share the burden I had, and at the age of 15 he begun to work full-time after school and assisted me in my job. Tibor came to London for the first time in 2008, and he fell in love with the free spirit of the city, the openness he could find in people, and decided to come here once he finished high school. He moved to London in July 2010 to study and gain some work experience. He started to work at the Radisson Edwardian Heathrow Hotel and really enjoyed working there. He loved his job, the responsibilities he had, the people he was working with, and the new customers he met every day. In his free time, he taught his colleagues and flatmates how to play musical instruments and built a DJ corner in his flat and mixed the music of his favourite artists. He performed his tricks on Daisy in the car park of the hotel. He was a frequent visitor to the gym and paid attention to his looks. He used to style his own hair and showcased his talent on his flatmate and colleague, Ute Karsh's. Although he really enjoyed every moment at the Radisson, he found it really hard to find his place within his family. That is why, after working for almost a year, he was very pleased to get admission at one of the best universities in Budapest. He was excited at the thought of returning home to his family. He planned to return home on the 30th of August 2011. On the 11th of August, I got to know that 2 innocent 20-year-olds, my son Tibor and his friend Alice, were murdered. I got to know that their lives were taken away by Tibor's friend. It was impossible and devastating to believe something like this could happen. Previous to that, it was comforting for me to know that Tibor found a good friend in London who was mature, friendly and intelligent. His friend promised me personally to look after my son and not let anything happen to him. I trusted him and regarded him as one of my own. That is another reason why the news about my son's murder was so devastating. Throughout the police investigation and trial, I had to relive the horrors of that night, which has only strengthened my sorrow. I am thankful for the support I received during these difficult days from the police. Although many questions remain unanswered about what has happened during the night that led to the murder of Tibor, most importantly, no reason could ever justify the pain he had to suffer in his last moments. I cannot describe the feeling I have in losing my son in such a tragic way. There are no words to describe the agony and the loss we as a family live with for the rest of our lives." Unquote.
Alice was a performing arts student who had only taken the job in the hotel to help out financially at home. She was described as kind and loving. Her family set up the Alice Adams Foundation. Alice had always loved the outdoors and building tree houses, so they set up the charity to raise money to build one in her honour. Spearheaded by Alice's Aunt Catherine, the Alice Adams Foundation achieved its goal and built the treehouse in 2016 in Alice's memory. It is designed for teenagers and young adults to give them a positive place to hang out. Alice should be remembered for the person she was and the impact she had on those who loved her, not for being a victim, because she was so much more than that. Tibor was supposed to be going to university. He'd lost his father at a young age and stepped up to help his mum and sister. Tibor was so excited to go home and further his education, but he never got the chance. As the judge described them, Alice and Tibor were two innocent and decent young people. They had their entire lives ahead of them, and so much more to give.
Attila Ban had told the court he was deeply remorseful and wanted to plead guilty. His defence attorney said that he would like to meet his victims' parents to help them grieve, saying, quote, "It might be that in months or more likely years to come, if he did remember more of what happened, that would be a realistic prospect." Unquote.
The accused Attila Ban had actually claimed diminished responsibility, but the jury refuted that defence and found him guilty of both murders here at the Old Bailey last month. Now, the prosecution and even the defence have described this case as bizarre. Ban was friends and worked with both the victims.
Attila Ban maintained that he could not remember killing Alice Adams and Tibor Vass in August 2011. He had tried to kill himself numerous times unsuccessfully and hid in the divan base of a bed for 2 days. Attila knew what he was doing. He cleaned Tibor's body and pulled him on the bed. Perhaps he felt remorse or simply wanted to control him. Attila will be eligible for parole in 2038. He will be almost 60. That is still plenty of life to live considering he stole the lives of 2 young people. We may outgrow the fear of a monster beneath the bed, but there can always be monsters hiding in plain sight. Thank you for listening to this episode. Please follow us on social media at CrimeLapse and at CrimeLapsePod. You can join us at Patreon if you like. And if you like what you hear, please leave us a 5-star review. Stay safe, stay home.